Hey guys, it's DBD Gamer Girl here. Welcome back to my channel. So I kind of have an interesting video for you guys today. If any of you remember, I made a video about a year ago or so maybe, where I basically went through all of the killers' lore and I ranked the killers just based on how I felt about their lore and how good their story was. And kind of as a companion video to that, today I thought it would be kind of interesting to rank the killers based on how much they actually have a killer mentality. So basically if they're inherently evil or if they're actually inherently a good person and everything in between. So I did have kind of trouble, trying to decide what the tiers should be for this because I feel like there is quite a gray area. But this is the ranks that I came up with. We have Brutal Killer, which is basically like they're inherently evil. There's no good qualities about them, and they basically just kill people for the sake of killing them. Then we have a bad person, which is kind of similar, but the only difference I would say between Brutal Killer and a bad person is a bad person, you can actually still see some humanity in them. Maybe they have some circumstances or something like that where you might at least see them as a little bit less than inherently evil, like a little bit better than that. Conflicting feelings is basically you might be a little bit torn on if the killer is a good person or a bad person. Like you might think, they are a bad person, but they have all of these circumstances which kind of led to that mentality and led to that outcome of them being the way that they are. Kind at heart is the killers that you really cannot imagine why they are killers. You can't picture them as being evil in any way. They actually seem like a really good person, and they have had just like crazy amount of bad things have happened to them. So it's kind of going to be hard. I feel like there's a lot of gray area, but I'm going to just be basically ranking them based on their lore. So even for the licensed killers, I'll be reading the lore and I'll just be ranking it based on that, to be fair, rather than thinking about any external things like, movies or anything like that. So I'm going to start with Trapper. So Trapper's story is basically that he idolized his dad, and his dad was truly a very abusive person, and the way that he ran his workforce in the mines was extremely heavy-handed, and he kind of applied the same mentality towards his own son. Trapper growing up, he did definitely have a sense of morals and morality, and he knew right from wrong because he saw the men working in the workforce as humans. Like, even though his dad basically considered them maggots with like no mind of their own, and he even knew that these workers were planning to unionize and stuff like that, and he hid that from his dad to protect them. Trapper was also really creative and artistic. He had a lot of like very healthy hobbies, but he was abused by his dad, and he witnessed a lot of bad things happen from his dad to other people. And basically, as he grew up, he started becoming more and more harsh and adopting more and more of his dad's like personality. And there are some things in the lore which kind of point to the fact that it was a combination of his dad's personality as well as the entity that was causing Trapper to become so harsh and unforgiving. And he did end up helping his dad with basically a mass murder. And then eventually it goes on to say that basically he killed his dad as well. Trapper is honestly like a difficult one because I do kind of want to say that he's a bad person just because of the extent of the crimes that he's committed and the number of innocent lives that he has taken. But at the same time, like, you can't argue that he is very much a result of his background, and also the entity was a big factor in Trapper's story as well, specifically. So as much as his crimes are really heinous, and I really don't sympathize with that whatsoever, I will put him in conflicting feelings because I can't say he was a kind person out and out, but it's difficult for me to say he was a bad person just because of the circumstances of his life. So let me know if you agree or disagree with that. Okay, Wraith. So Wraith, honestly, you know, his lore is basically that he lost all his family in his old country, and then he came to this country hoping for a new beginning, and he was basically just trying to work hard to provide for himself. He was working at a scrapyard. He was ignoring all the bad things going around there and focusing on himself. And then he found out that he had actually been crushing people the whole time when he was actually wrecking cars in the scrapyard. And he just mentally could not handle the fact that he had been murdering people all this time. So the thing is, when Wraith initially did find someone in the car, he freed them and he was trying to help them. But then his boss slit their throat in front of his eyes. And that's when he found out the whole devastating reality of what he had been doing. So I do think that Wraith is a good person. I think he has a kind heart, and, you know, he was dealt the worst cards in life. And, you know, he was still a very positive, kind person despite his bad circumstances, which is really hard. That's actually a really hard thing to do. But he was doing that. And then I feel learning about the scrapyard situation and the fact that he was actually a killer without knowing is what made him snap. And that, I feel is what makes me think that he's actually kind at heart. He snapped. He just could not handle that news. Hillbilly. Hillbilly story is that basically he was born disfigured and his parents did not accept him for how he looked, and they were very ashamed of him, and they basically kept him holed up in this room, and they would just feed him through a hole, and he wasn't allowed to socialize. He wasn't really allowed to do anything. He was neglected and abused. And moreover, if they ever did, you know, have him do anything, they would basically be entertaining people by making fun of him and having him slaughter cattle and stuff. And they would make fun of him saying, "You don't even really have a name, and our pigs are even named." And eventually Hillbilly did kill his parents and escape into the woods, and he killed some policemen and stuff also that tried to come after him. And during his life, he was very abusive to animals as well. He would just torture them and cut them open. And I do hate this part about him because animals don't have a voice of their own, but at the same time, I think it was just all internalized from his parents, making fun of him and basically saying he's even lesser than a pig because they don't want to acknowledge his name and stuff like that. And they were forcing him to do that messed up stuff as he was growing up. So Hillbilly is definitely extremely violent. Again, just like Trapper, he is very much so a product of his environment. And in those kind of neglectful conditions and based on what his parents made him do as a child, I feel there is a big possibility of anyone snapping under those conditions. So for that reason, I'm also going to put Hillbilly under the conflicting feelings tier. I don't think I think if he had not been locked into a room and he had been able to grow up like a regular child, I don't think he would be an insane serial killer. Okay, Nurse. Nurse used to be happily married, but she did have to take up a job at an asylum when her husband passed away, in order for her to continue living and making money. And during her time at the asylum, she basically just saw a lot of things that were really disturbing to her, and her mental health was declining over the years. At some point in the tome lore, it kind of also mentions that she basically felt like these mentally sick people were getting so much care that her husband had not gotten. And she kind of almost seems jealous of that fact. And she thinks that these people don't deserve the care and attention that they are getting. And she eventually develops kind of a purifying mentality where she wants to rid the world of these people because she thinks that they're not deserving. And yeah, I think this is where Nurse basically goes off the deep end for me. And she basically ended up killing a bunch of the patients at the asylum because she thought she was like purging the world of these people. And I have to say that she is a bad person, even though I do understand that her mental health declined over the years of working at the asylum. The entity was definitely a factor in her decline as well. But just, yeah, her mentality of cleansing the world of these mentally sick or ill people, I just, like, no matter what is causing that, I just think that she is a bad person, so I'm gonna have to put her in that category. I would almost even put her in brutal killer, but here again, the only thing that's keeping me from putting her in brutal killer is that she lived for a long time happily. She had like normal dreams about having a house and having kids with her husband while she was married. But him dying probably changed her mentality, changed her outlook on life, changed the outcome. So Huntress, or Anna, her summary of her backstory is basically that she used to live in the woods with her mom. Her mom would show her how to do everything, like build everything, like hunt animals, would sing her to sleep, tell her stories. And then eventually one day her mom was killed in an elk attack when they were out together hunting because they were starving and really needed food. And Anna was left as a little kid by herself with her mom dead. And she knew enough about how to survive to get by. And she was completely living isolated. And it does say she grew older and stronger, practiced her hunt. As she grew into a dangerous predator, her humanity became a half-remembered dream. And when people started coming through the woods, that was her favorite prey. And she was killing them. And she liked to collect their things. The only humans that she could not kill were little girls, which I assume is because they reminded her of herself when she was a little girl. And she would try to take them home and, you know, give them toys and books and stuff, but she would keep them tied up, thinking that she was protecting them, but a lot of the time these little girls would die. Huntress's childhood really makes you feel very sad for her, very sorry for her. She was probably traumatized from her mom dying. And I feel like the way that it kind of tries to justify Huntress killing so many people is because she basically became like a wild animal and she saw regular humans as her prey. So to her, it wasn't so much of a, I'm evil, like I'm gonna kill and murder these people, but it was more so like, I need to do this to survive, and this is the natural hierarchy of life. And you can see she did have a little bit of humanity inside her because she did try to rescue little girls because they reminded her of herself and protect them, but she was not the best at doing that because she simply did not know what a human needs in order to survive, like at least a regular human with regular conditions. This is hard. In a way, I do feel like being a bit harsh on her because her mom was just teaching her how to survive. But her mom never told her to, like, kill people. And having lived with her mom when she was a kid, I feel like she knew the value of, like, having relationships and companionship. So going from that to becoming a killer is kind of a big jump. I am putting her in a bad person, but I am a little bit conflicted about that. So let me know your guys' thoughts on Huntress. Okay, Myers is just inherently evil. Like, there's no question. He loves hurting people. He loves scaring people. And he feels like he's not at peace unless he kills people. And there's just no reason for this. It's just how he is, how he was born inherently. Literally, his backstory says, some humans are simply bad seeds infused with a distilled and pure form of evil. And Michael Myers is one of those seeds. So Myers is just definitely going in brutal killer. There's no circumstantial things. Like, it's just completely very clear that he is just the seed of evil, basically, is what it says. Doctor's backstory is that he was picked for special training for some neuroscience program, and he did meet another doctor there who was kind of his mentor, And under his mentor's leadership, he basically used torture methods to extract information from prisoners. And he really used electroshock therapy very dramatically, which did, uncover threats to national security, but his methods were obviously very questionable. But eventually it did come out that he was using like a really insane types of torture methods to get this information. I just think Doctor is a brutal killer. I really do think he's a brutal killer because he didn't really have anything like circumstantial that would have caused this. Or, like he did have a mentor, and maybe his mentor was also a bit crazy and kind of was guiding him towards the more brutal methods. But at that point, he's a full-grown adult. He can say no. He can leave the job. So no, he is a brutal killer, and I will not have it any other way. This kind of is interesting because it says whether killers perform their heinous acts by the compulsions of their diseased minds or if they are forced into them by external pressures has been a matter of debate. But for one killer, nature and nurture are inextricably linked. So Bubba, based on his backstory, I feel like he's very heavily influenced by his family and he does not know any better. And literally it does say that like in his backstory as well, that he just kills because he's scared. He's scared of getting hurt, scared of, getting rejected. And he's also dealt with an outsider, basically in his words, killing his brother. And I feel like he did feel vengeful over that. He definitely is not a good person, I would not say, but honestly, based on his lore, I feel like he just does not know any better, and a lot of the reason that he kills people is because of external circumstances and being told by his family that it's the right thing to do. And again, it's something that he has like grown up with, and I'm kind of torn about where to put him. I think I'll put him in conflicting feelings. Just because it literally, like, his lore literally makes it a point to say that he is a product of his circumstances. But I would not say he's kind at heart at all. I feel like he just, like, does not know what he's doing almost. And he's just in this blind desire to protect his family. And it did make it a point to say he took very good care of his family and he had a lot of family-related roles. So because it, emphasizes that so much, I'm going to put him in conflicting feelings. The nightmare, Freddy. Freddy is, again, just purely evil. I feel like he's very similar to Myers in that aspect. And he tried to act like he was nice and friendly, but he was actually a very evil person behind that. And he was also very obsessive about Nancy and Quentin. He was just stalking them, hating them. I just think that Freddy is inherently evil. So I'm going to put him in brutal killer as well. Okay, the pig. So Pig was basically one of Jigsaw's test subjects, and she did pass his tests, and she became really devoted to him, and she would basically help him, find more test subjects and trap them. And she also did, trapping of her own. I don't think that Pig is a good person, even though she was heavily influenced by external circumstances. Like, she was a druggie, and I feel like Jigsaw she almost saw Jigsaw as like saving her from herself in a way, and she just became like really, really devoted to a cause. To be honest, to his cause, I just don't understand people that throw themselves into devoting themselves to a bad cause. Like, you should still have the morality of right versus wrong. And even Amanda's backstory, like, it does say that she just had a history of hurting herself, hurting others. So I just overall think that she is a bad person. I don't know if I would call her a brutal killer because she did have all these external circumstances kind of putting her towards that, but she could borderline be a brutal killer. But I'm just gonna say she's not, because I don't think she had a history of that prior to Jigsaw. Spirit. Okay, Spirit, I think, is just a good person. Like, she was studying and, you know, her dad kind of eventually went crazy, killed her mom. She was trying to fight him to protect her mom, and she just died from that. And she has a vengeance against her dad. She kind of made an oath to get payback. I think Spirit is honestly just a good person. She didn't have anything in her life that indicated that she was a bad person prior to this situation with her dad. Like, she was just a girl trying to make a living for herself, like go to college. And yeah, I just think Spirit is a kind person. And honestly, I could see Spirit even as more of a survivor than a killer, or even Wraith. I could see him as more of a survivor than a killer. So Legion. So with Legion, you do have the 4 characters: Frank, Joey, Julie, and Susie. I do think there are some variations to how evil some of them are compared to others. I feel like Frank was definitely the ringleader in terms of kind of escalating the group to do more and more risky, more and more criminal things until eventually they hit that point stabbing that cleaner. And they all took turns stabbing the cleaner, basically. So they all did partake in that. Clearly it did affect them, but they did do it. At the end of the day, they all made the choice to stab that innocent person, and they all made the choice to kind of go along with Frank. And then they did decide to hide the body. I know Frank has like basically a really sad backstory, you know, going through the foster system and then having these like terrible families that he was going into. And I feel like that kind of made him a rebel and made him go into that mentality to a degree. But killing someone, like, that is a whole next level. Like, until that point, I feel like some of the crimes could have been like, okay, you know, he came from a very bad background, he's lashing out. But killing someone is just, yeah, like, that escalated way too much, and I'm just gonna put them into a bad person. The only reason that I'm not putting it into a brutal killer is because of the past that Frank went through. Ghostface is very similar to Myers in the sense that he kills just for the sake of killing. He likes being stealthy and very methodical with his kills. And he likes just scaring people. He likes the chase. It literally says, "A woman shrieked, dead leaves crunched under his feet. He smiled in anticipation." And he just like loves, you know, everybody reading what he's doing. He loves bringing scenes to life. And I just think that Ghostface is just inherently evil. That definitely puts him into the brutal killer category because he has no reason for killing other than just enjoying the thrill of it, enjoying people seeing it, enjoying people being scared. And that's just it. So yeah, he's clearly evil. Demogorgon is just like a creature. Like, Demogorgon is a monster. It's just unrestrained. It says it has no compassion or restraint, no doubt or mercy, just the pure instinct of its insatiable bloodlust as it delivers the death blow. A demo, like, I'm just gonna put it in brutal killer. Anyways, the demo is not in this tier list, I guess, because it's not in the game anymore, but Demo, like, I would put it in brutal killer. Do I think it's like necessarily evil? Like, no, I don't really think it's evil. I think it's just a creature. Like, I don't think it has any like thoughts or emotions. I also don't watch Stranger Things, so correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the backstory, which is what I've been doing for all the killers, I just think that Demo's a killer and there's not really any emotion or thought behind it, so there's no point even thinking about it that much. Oni is just inherently evil. Like, he literally goes on a rampage to try to rid Japan of imposters, and he ignores all the code that he's learned. He ignores his family's advice and help, and he just kills like a whole bunch of people, brutally humiliates people. He's like really angry. He has a lot of bloodlust, and he has this ridiculous sense of honor that doesn't even like adhere to the normal thoughts of what honor should be. And he's so insane that monks think that he was like possessed, and you know, he has anger about how people have spoken of him, and he literally like goes and like yank someone's tongue out. He's just a raging like ball of insanity, and he's pure evil. Like, I'm putting him in brutal killer, no question. Death Slinger, he did take an interest in his dad's tools, and like initially he wanted to make these torture devices out of them for his bullies. Not that he ever actually ended up implementing that. At first, he used his engineering aptitude to actually do some real projects, such as making a steam-powered tunneling drill, etc., etc. He was turning in these ideas to work, but he quickly realized that his patents and ideas were getting stolen and showing up at other companies. And basically he went into a rage, and he went into the office and he basically tried to kill his boss. His boss did end up surviving, but Deathslinger went to prison. And in prison, he worked with the warden to basically torture other prisoners and bring in more prisoners and stuff like that. Eventually, he did get out of jail, and he roamed around the country with a gang. Eventually, he saw his old boss purchasing the jail that he had been staying at, and he kind of went into a rage, and he really went there and beat up the warden and his old boss like very badly, and they were kind of begging for death. And then basically it implied, I feel, that he was going to kill them. I do think that Deathslinger is a bad person. He did torture and go around killing a lot of people. I mean, I do understand that he was in a gang and this occurs like in a different time period in the Midwest. But at the same time, I think overall he did lack a good sense of morals, and the fact that he went into that much of a rage over people stealing his ideas that he wanted to go kill someone is a huge jump, and I think that right there is a red flag. So I'm gonna put him into bad person. I'm not going to say he's a brutal killer, because he did have some loyalty like to his gang and stuff like that, and there were trigger events like the stealing of his ideas that caused him to do it, rather than him just going around killing people. But I would say that he is a bad person for sure. Yeah, and I was filming for so long that I had to take a break and come back. But I have my iced coffee now, ASMR, so I'm good to go. So Pyramid Head is also definitely brutal killer. It says he's a sadist and he has no mercy, and he likes dispensing punishment through pain, and everybody's really afraid of him. He has like ridiculous aggression. And yeah, it basically just says like he accepted it as an obligation to continue his sadistic ways. So Pyramid Head is definitely going in a brutal killer tier easily. Blight. Blight was definitely a creative scientist type, and he developed some serums and drugs that basically enhanced people's work performance while reducing their need for rest, which, while that's an amazing innovation, it's very questionable morality-wise. And, you know, he was kind of hearing these rumors that his serums and stuff were having these bad side effects, like people were going feral and they were going on like these killing sprees and that kind of stuff. But he basically chose to ignore them until literally some people basically kidnapped him and took him to a mass grave with a bunch of dead bodies. And he realized that his serums were affecting people mentally and causing deaths. And eventually, you know, he like holed up in a monastery type place with a bunch of monks, and he was trying to get enlightened, and he kind of just went off the deep end trying to, you know, get to the other side. But overall, I kind of struggle with placing Blight, because I do genuinely think that his ambition and his drive is what was kind of causing him to put on blinders and not really think that he was hurting people until it literally stared him in the face and he could not, like, you know, argue that anymore. So is he a bad person? Like, I think it's like very debatable. Like, I think I kind of want to put him in conflicting feelings, because I just don't think he intentionally or maliciously meant to hurt people. I think he was just so driven and blinded by his desire to, you know, innovate and break the barriers that he kind of got blinded to the negative side effects that he was having. Trickster is like very purely evil. Like he, you know, killed his bandmates like in the fire, like he let them die. He was very selfish. He just like loved to be adored and respected. He saw the death of his bandmates as a gift to him and he took full advantage of it. He killed like so many people. It was like a part of his weird, messed up, like creative process, and there's really no debate here. Like Trickster is clearly a brutal killer, so he's going in the top. Nemesis, honestly, like Nemesis, I feel like again is like in the demo category where it seems like he is literally just a super soldier. He was made to eliminate targets. Like he doesn't have very much intelligence. I mean, he doesn't have emotional awareness of its own. Like it does say he has increased intelligence and awareness, but it seems more so just like from a strategy point of view, not like an emotional point of view. So I'm gonna put him into brutal killer category just because like I feel like it's very similar to Demo in that respect. Pinhead. Demon to some, angel to others, he's an explorer in the further regions of experience, the limitless thrill of pleasure and pain. What? Dude, I feel like this is one of those ones where like you have to like understand his actual backstory from his movie rather than going based off of this backstory, because this is the most generic backstory I've ever seen in my life. I don't know. Is Pinhead good or bad? Like, no, okay, this is not enough to go on, so let me do a little bit of research and I will be right back. While Pinhead isn't a villain in the first two Hellraiser movies, he's a neutral representative of hell. He switches to becoming an unequivocal, full-blown bad guy in Hellraiser 3. I'm kind of confused, honestly, you guys. Like, I don't know enough about Pinhead. It seems like eventually he became evil in, like, some of the later movies, but just based on, because I really don't know, like, I'm just gonna put him in conflicting feelings, but guys, don't think that this means, like, I feel like he's a good person or anything. I just simply don't know enough about Pinhead. The backstory is a little bit confusing because it says he's a demon to some and angel to others, so I'm a little bit confused about that. If you guys like know more about Pinhead, like let me know your thoughts. Okay, on Rio. So Sadako basically had a lot of supernatural powers that she had trouble controlling when she was young. She did, you know, get pushed into a well. And basically she found an opportunity for revenge. She summoned all her power and cursed a videotape that killed any viewers after 7 days. So she basically went into this like permanent fury over like what happened to her. I do feel like that Sadako is a bad person because she was already killing people like even prior to the whole well incident. I mean, part of it might be because she was having trouble controlling her powers, but I don't know. And someone pushed her into the well, but like not everybody in the world pushed her into the well. So the fact that she was just like avenging herself, you know, to like everyone, including like people that had nothing to do with the incident related to her, like I just think she's like a bad person. I'm not gonna put her in brutal killer because there was clearly like a trigger like event that caused her to be so angry. Honestly, I have not read the Knight's lore at all. This will be my first time kind of like reading and understanding his lore. So, okay, so when I started off reading, at first I thought that he might have just been a good person in bad circumstances, but the more and more that I kept reading, like definitely not. So the Knight, all that he remembers from his childhood is that he basically woke up in a village of burning flames with all of these dead bodies, and his mom was giving him some type of medicine, Eventually, he was taken away in a buggy by some men, and he basically joined some guards and he did some training there. He did develop a few strong, close bonds with some of the other guards. He was recognized for his bravery in battle. He got his knighthood and freedom. So he was now liberated, but he still wanted something more, but he didn't know what. He was the only one that was liberated. His friends were not liberated, and he does show some loyalty to his friends. He joined Vittorio, a wealthy Italian lord, on his quest to basically find the stone that he thought had secrets to open a gateway into like a perfect world. And they did eventually arrive to where the stone is, but they realized they would have to kill a bunch of villagers to actually retrieve the stone because the villagers were protecting it. And the knight was all gung-ho, ready to do this. Vittorio was like, no, this is wrong, we should not do this. But the knight just waited for Vittorio to leave, and then he just went and brutally killed everyone. Then he took the stone and he was demanding to Vittorio to tell him like what the symbols on the stone meant, but Vittorio was not telling him. So the knight basically started torturing Vittorio's friends and family. Like, he was just causing havoc everywhere, you know, obliterating everything from his old guards, and he freed his friends. And by this time, a lot of lords in neighboring provinces literally thought he was the embodiment of evil. They were literally trying to like make an army to just fight this insanely evil guy. He did try to go to kill Vittorio, but Vittorio was no longer there anymore. Like, pretty much they were fighting back and forth, like the moral and virtuous army as well as the knight's army. And eventually he found what he had been searching for all his life, which is the sublime, which I guess is the entity's realm in this case. So it was definitely an interesting story. I do think that the knight is a bad person. Like, I would put him in brutal killer almost. I think the only thing that's keeping me from putting him in brutal killer is that he was like taken as a child and he was literally raised as a knight. So he was basically exposed to violence like his entire life and chaos. So that's pretty much like all that he knows. So I can't put him in, you know, brutal killer. I'm going to be putting him in bad person. So Wesker is definitely inherently evil. Like, he wanted to expose the world to a biological weapon that would eliminate the weak and leave only the strong. That kind of reminds me of where Nurse went after she kind of became mentally unstable. So he definitely wants to eliminate a lot of people in the world, and he thinks that they're lesser beings that deserve to be put out of their misery, which is a very ridiculous sentiment. So he's going in brutal killer for me easily. The Dredge. So the concept of the Dredge started when there was once a leader of an organization called the Fold, which his idea was to establish a peaceful society free of dark thoughts and emotions, which is pretty much an impossible task. But they did try to do that, and Otto actually banished anyone that had any dark thoughts. And he always told this story of this god called the Druani. I don't know how to pronounce it, but basically he said it fed on dark memories and desires, and it needed to be, and any manifestations of darkness needed to be expelled in order to prevent this creature from manifesting, basically. And then eventually a journalist came to town who was trying to tell all his followers that Otto was actually not just banishing people that had dark thoughts, he was like torturing them and killing them, basically. Otto slit her throat to prevent her from spreading lies, And he said that the journalist was working with other people like within the community and that they needed to find the imposters before the Jueni came for them all. And everybody at this point had like dark thoughts, like they had a lot of fear, and all these years of suppressed emotion basically caused the dredge to emerge and form, and it was consuming everybody's dark thoughts and stuff. So the dredge was basically a manifestation of everybody's dark thoughts and fears. So for that reason, I'm going to put dredge in brutal killer tier because it's simply manifested out of dark things. It's very interesting to me that the dredge is the killer rather than Otto, so it's definitely a very interesting concept. So the artist literally, I feel like, has one of the most depressing stories in DBD. Like, her life is literally a series of unfortunate events, and at no point in the story is she ever a bad person. So basically, her mom abandoned the family and the dad blamed her for it, which doesn't make any sense. And then she was basically taking care of her little brother, and then at some point her little brother died in a drowning accident, and she like blamed herself, and her dad also blamed her, which is also completely ridiculous. She went to kill herself, but then she decided not to. She was using drawing as a creative outlet, but at one point she made like a controversial piece, and there are some gunmen that came to kind of, you know, hurt her because I guess they were upset by that, and they cut off her hands, they like tortured her friends, and she was like blaming herself for all of it. I can't even wrap my head around her story. Like, it's so sad and depressing. She's definitely kind at heart. She's just been, you know, having a very difficult life, being blamed for everything at every point in her life, and she does not deserve that kind of treatment. So yeah, definitely kind at heart. Poor artist, honestly. The twins, I feel so bad for them. They also have like one of the really sad stories where they were a pair of conjoined twins and nobody accepted them because of how they looked. Everybody just considered them like a demon basically, and they were like on the run for many years together. They developed a very strong bond, went through a lot of crazy things together. Their mom was literally burned at the stake, and then they were like experimented on for years by this cult. Eventually, after years, they got away, but Victor died, and she basically carried Victor's corpse around on her. Like, oh my god, it's so sad. So I'm definitely gonna put them in kind at heart because, I mean, they were really just good people fleeing from everyone who hated them and were trying to persecute them just for the way that they look and the way that they were born. So they had so many evil and terrible things done to them. I feel so bad. Honestly, they should be like survivors. Plague was left as a baby at the steps of a temple, and she kind of grew up with a life of quiet servitude, and she was really devoted to the people of the temple, and eventually people were really respecting her because she was helping a lot of the priests, and they now regarded her as a priestess. She even like sacrificed her own toe for a follower. Plague was a very nice person, in my opinion, and when she did get the plague, she got very ashamed of it, and she actually exiled herself, and she went to a cave to basically pass in peace. There were definitely devoted followers of hers who actually went with her and followed her. And, you know, the tome lore does mention that there were some human sacrifices that she made, but she was doing it all in the name of the gods that she believed in. So I feel like that's more of a time period thing. She did also end up killing her mentor, but to me, it seems like that was done by the entity. Like, the entity was really strong in her by that point. So all in all, like, Plague was very devoted to her followers, and she even exiled herself when she got the plague to prevent it from spreading to other people. So I will definitely be putting her into the kind at heart category. Clown is inherently evil, dude. Like, he literally has the serial killer type beginning where he would just like torture and hurt animals like when he was a little kid. He did have a really difficult childhood in the sense that his mom died when he was born, delivering him, and he and his dad didn't have a close relationship, and his dad kind of resented him for it, and his dad also had a drinking habit. But it does say they lived mostly separate lives. He was basically left to his own devices as like a really young child. He started like killing animals, and then eventually it escalated to human beings, and he just like really enjoys the kills, and he considers it like his true self. And it literally says he would finally get to have his fun mentally and physically torturing them, their screams fueling him before being lost in the night. He just like enjoys killing. He's a brutal killer, like no question about it. So Hag was basically kidnapped sometime on her way home. And they like literally kept her chained up, and she was like in these really bad conditions, and cannibals were carving bites from their bodies. She was trying to stay alive. She was starved, mutilated. She felt very vengeful. Eventually the police did find the house, but all the inhabitants had been dismembered and eaten. Her body was never found though. I think that Hag is inherently a good person. She was just kidnapped and put into the worst situation imaginable, which would just drive anyone insane under those conditions. So yeah, basically that brings me to the conclusion of the killers and how fitting I think they are for being a killer versus actually being a nice person in a bad situation. Some of these were like a little bit questionable for me. There's so much gray area when talking about these things, and there's so many points to like consider. So take these ratings with a huge grain of salt. Let me know of your thoughts, which ones you agreed, which ones you disagreed, which ones probably needed more information. Anyways, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy my content. I hope you guys are having a great week, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.
I've got an itch I can't scratch, I'm missing a piece that completes a whole part of me, an open wound scar to see. Everybody come here, gather round, welcome to the freak show, the best in town. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't get along with anybody, honestly. I've been living in my own head constantly, thoughts jumbled round, think I need a new lobotomy. Wait, all these thoughts are too negative. I don't wanna get lost in